The sun had barely lifted over the red rim of the canyon when the boy came walking down the dirt road, dust clinging to his boots and tears drying on his face. His hat was too big for him, drooping low over eyes that had seen too much in a single night. He carried nothing but a small satchel and a note folded in his pocket. On it were 6 words written in a trembling hand. I lost my family today. Can you take me with you? He didn't know who he was walking toward. The letter had been meant for anyone kind enough to read it. The town of Dry Creek sat 10 miles west, a scatter of buildings clinging to life between the desert and the river. That's where he thought he might find someone, maybe a ranch hand, maybe a preacher, maybe anyone who could look at him and not turn away. By noon the heat had turned mean. He stopped by a dry well and stared into it, his reflection small and trembling. He thought of his mother's hands, cracked from washing clothes by the river, and his father's voice calling out across the plains at night. Then he thought of the fire. How quick it had swallowed their house, how the sky had turned the color of blood, how silence had followed when the screams stopped. He had run until dawn, barefoot and bleeding. Now, he was just a boy with no place to go. A low rumble came from the horizon. He looked up to see a horse and rider cutting through the heat waves, moving slow but steady. The horse was a big gray, scarred on its flank, and the rider wore a coat that had seen better years. As they neared, the boy took a step back, clutching his satchel. The man pulled his horse to a stop and peered down. His beard was streaked with gray, his eyes dark and unreadable. You lost, kid. The boy swallowed. No, sir. I lost my family. The man's eyes softened a fraction. That's so. Yes, sir. The boy reached into his pocket and held out the note. I was hoping maybe you could take me with you. The man studied him for a long time. Then he took the note, read it once, and folded it back into the boy's hand. What's your name, son? Eli. Well, Eli, the man said, name's Morgan Hayes. I'm headed toward Dry Creek for supplies. Ain't much there, but there's food, water, and a roof. You can ride with me if you've a mind to. Eli hesitated, then nodded. Morgan reached down a weathered hand and pulled him up behind the saddle. The horse shifted but didn't protest. As they rode west, Eli leaned against the man's coat, smelling the dust and leather, the faint scent of tobacco. For the first time in 2 days, he let himself breathe. They reached Dry Creek by sundown. The town was small, just a main street lined with a saloon, a general store, a blacksmith, and a weathered church at the far end. Morgan tied the horse outside the saloon and led Eli inside. The air smelled of whiskey and old wood. A few men looked up, eyes narrowing at the sight of a kid. Morgan ordered stew and bread for 2. Eli ate like someone afraid the food might vanish. When he was done, Morgan slid him a glass of milk and asked quietly, You got anywhere to go, Eli? The boy shook his head. No, sir. Any kin? No, sir. They're all gone. Morgan rubbed his chin. Then I reckon you'll come with me a while. I've got a small spread a day's ride north. Ain't much, but there's room. Eli nodded, and something heavy in his chest eased. That night, Morgan found him a cot in the saloon's back room. When the boy finally fell asleep, Morgan sat outside smoking, staring at the desert. He'd buried a family once too, a wife and daughter taken by fever 10 years past. Since then, he'd ridden alone, chasing work, running from ghosts. Maybe now he had someone to look after again. At dawn they left town. The sky was wide and merciless, but Eli felt a kind of peace riding beside Morgan. The land rolled out before them, sagebrush plains, dry creeks, far-off mountains that shimmered blue in the heat. They rode in silence for hours. By afternoon, a storm began to build. The wind turned sharp, whipping dust into their faces. Morgan led the way toward a line of cliffs. There's a cave up ahead, he called. We'll hole up till it passes. They reached shelter just as rain started to fall, hard and cold. Inside the cave, Morgan built a small fire. Eli watched the flames dance and said quietly, You ever lose anyone, Mr. Hayes? Morgan stared into the fire. Yeah, son. I lost 'em all. How do you live with it? Morgan took a long breath. You don't, not really. You just keep writing. Some days that's all you can do. Eli nodded. I wish I could forget. Don't, Morgan said. Remembering hurts, but it's what keeps them alive in you. The storm raged all night. By morning the air was clean and sharp, the desert washed new. They rode again, and by noon they reached Morgan's ranch, a small cabin by a creek, a corral, a few cattle grazing. It wasn't much, but to Eli it looked like heaven. Morgan showed him the ropes, how to water the horses, mend a fence, cook beans over the fire. Eli took to the work fast. Days turned into weeks, and the boy's shoulders began to square, his voice steadied. Sometimes, when the wind blew right, Morgan would hear him humming. Soft, half a tune his mother must have sung. It made something ache in his chest. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the hills in fire, Eli asked, You think I could stay here? Maybe work for you. Morgan smiled a little. Ain't no work you ain't already doing. You stay as long as you want, son. Eli grinned, the first real grin Morgan had seen from him. He thought maybe, just maybe, they both had a chance to start again. Then one morning, trouble came riding. 3 men on horseback, dust rising behind them. Morgan recognized them before they even spoke. Leroy Cutter and his brothers, rustlers from down south. They'd crossed paths before, and not kindly. Cutter dismounted, grinning like a wolf. Heard you're keeping company these days, Hayes. Boy looks a bit young for your line of work. Morgan stepped forward. He's just a hand. Leave him out of this. Cutter's grin widened. Ain't planning to take him. Just came for what's ours. You still got that gray horse. The one you lifted off us outside Yuma. That horse was half dead when I found him, Morgan said evenly. Didn't see your brand on him. Then you didn't look hard enough. Cutter's hand dropped to his gun. Eli froze. Morgan's voice dropped low. Get inside, Eli. The boy didn't move. Mr. Hayes. Go. Eli ran for the cabin just as the first shot cracked the air. Morgan dove behind the trough, firing back. The sound of gunfire echoed across the hills. Cutter's men spread out, trying to flank him. Morgan took one down with a clean shot to the shoulder, but a bullet grazed his arm, spinning him back. Blood darkened his sleeve. Inside the cabin, Eli crouched by the window, heart pounding. He saw Cutter creeping toward Morgan's blind side. Without thinking, he grabbed the old rifle hanging above the door. His hands shook, but he remembered how Morgan had shown him to aim. Steady, slow breath, squeeze, don't jerk. He fired. The shot hit Cutter's hat clean off, grazing his head. The outlaw staggered, turned, and fired back, but Eli had already ducked. Morgan used the moment to put Cutter down with a final shot. When the dust settled, 2 men lay dead and 1 rode off wounded. Morgan slumped against the trough, breathing hard. Eli ran to him, eyes wide. You're bleeding. Just a scratch, Morgan muttered, though his face was pale. He looked at the boy and managed a grin. Nice shooting. Eli started to shake. I didn't mean to. I just. You did what you had to, son. Morgan put a hand on his shoulder. Ain't no shame in protecting your home. They buried the dead in the dry wash. The next day, Morgan stitched his arm and said they'd ride to town soon, tell the marshal. For now, they sat by the fire, silent except for the crackle of wood. After a long while, Eli spoke. Mr. Hayes. Yeah, son. When you found me, I thought I didn't have anyone left. But now, he looked at the flames. I think maybe I do. Morgan's throat tightened. Yeah, he said softly. Reckon I do too. That night, he dreamed of his wife and daughter standing in the doorway, smiling. In the dream, they turned and walked into the light, and for the first time in years, he didn't try to follow. Seasons passed. The ranch grew, the cattle multiplied. Eli grew taller, stronger, his voice deeper. He learned to rope, to ride, to shoot straight. The boy who had walked out of the ashes became a young man with purpose in his stride. Morgan watched him with pride and a quiet sorrow, knowing one day the road would call him too. On a cool spring morning, Eli packed a saddlebag. Morgan stood by the fence, arms folded. "You sure about this?" Eli nodded. "I need to see what's out there. Maybe find where I came from." Morgan handed him the folded note, the same one he'd carried that first day. "Keep this," he said. "So you remember where you started." Eli took it, eyes wet. "You saved me, Mr. Hayes." Morgan shook his head. "No, son. We saved each other." They clasped hands, rough palms meeting. Then Eli mounted up and rode toward the horizon, the wind at his back. Morgan watched until he was just a speck against the golden plain. Years later, travelers passing through Dry Creek spoke of a man who rode under the name Eli Hayes, known for helping the lost, the broken, the wandering. Some said he carried a note in his pocket, faded from years of folding, that read, "I lost my family today. Can you take me with you?" And when anyone asked what it meant, he would smile and say, "It means we all find our way, one kind soul at a time."